Hi everyone, welcome back to A Little Help for Our Friends. Today, Kibby and I have a guest we are really excited about. And I bet you will be excited about too, because probably a lot of us just watched him win Tayshia's heart on The Bachelorette. So we will be welcoming Zac Clark. We will be talking about addiction recovery. I think a lot of people who watch the show know that Zac is a recovered addict himself, and he spoke a lot about addiction and recovery on the show. But he actually does work in addiction recovery as well. He and his best friend started Release Recovery, which is basically an aftercare program for people who are trying to gain and retain sobriety. So they have houses where they have a house for men, a house for women, where people go. They live with other people who are trying to maintain sobriety, and they live a structured life with a loving and caring, supportive community. Zac provides consultation, and it's just a really wonderful resource. And he will be speaking about what he's learned about addiction recovery, his own journey with addiction and sobriety, and speaking a little bit about, the role that friends and family play, because it's really crucial for everyone. But I mean, he really, I think, gives a lot of credit to his loved ones for helping him get through this. So we're really just honored to have him on our show. Pretty much the entire episode is going to be us talking to Zac. So I'll turn it over to our interview now. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to A Little Help for Our Friends, and we are super excited to have our special guest today. So today is going to be a bit of a unique episode. We're going to have this guest throughout the whole episode. That's how stoked we are to have him here. So today we're going to be talking about addiction recovery with Zac Clark. Welcome, Zac. Thanks so much.
What's up, guys? I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So we watched you on The Bachelorette. We are so happy, by the way, to see the ending. It was maybe the most beautiful proposal I've seen on The Bachelor. So
seriously, I never tear up in that show, and I was like,
it was a little one.
It was nice. It was just a little.
I appreciate that. It was from the heart, so all good.
Well, you talked a lot about your own road with addiction and recovery on the show, and so just kind of wanted to hear your story. Here. Anything you think was important to share? How it kind of started, how it snowballed, in your own words.
Yeah, no, of course. I think people got to see me and know me through the television set, but one of the things I was most proud of is I was able to really go there and be authentic and be myself. And that's just a direct result of my recovery, right? And those who know me know that it's not something that I'm ashamed to talk about, because I'm very aware to the fact that everything in my life kind of stems off of, my journey and what I had to do to get to where I am today. So, I'll say, like, I work in the field, right? And I've really dedicated my life to helping others. It's something that I'm really passionate about. And I didn't know it, until I got sober, that I really wanted to help other people. I always loved human beings and that connection. And even when I was partying, right? Like, I loved to be the guy kind of making sure everyone had the drink they needed, or whatever else it was. So for me, I found great joy in helping others, but it took a lot to get to where I am today. So I don't know if you guys want like the nitty gritty. I don't know what.
Yeah, give us everything. I was going to ask, like, when did you start to notice that this was a problem? Like, how did it all start? I mean, give us everything.
Well, look, I mean, I'll say a couple things. One is there's a lot of energy, right? And there's a lot of energy even of late around the idea that, people who are in recovery are kind of handicapped or not able to do the things that other people are able to do. And I'm here to tell you that it's really the exact opposite. Like it's almost like my superpower. And, I can tell you that this thing, based on my life experience and kind of what I've been through to this point, what I know is that it doesn't discriminate. And I can tell you that I grew up in a really loving home in South Jersey with like two badass parents that just really showed me all the life lessons that you need to be shown at a young age. The value of a dollar, how to treat a woman, how to treat your teachers, how to treat other humans with respect. I had, an older brother that would, beat down on me, and we'd have our little wrestling matches in the most loving and big brother way. I don't say that, and two sisters who are just angels. And so, I didn't want for anything growing up. And what I do know is I had a pretty, what I think a lot of people would define as a normal upbringing, right? Like I grew up in this home with the white picket fence, and the Clarks to most people were like a normal family. And, like my high school experiences, I remember my first drink. Like I think everyone kind of remembers that first drink, like that first time you kind of cross over to the dark side. And for me, it was, we went to this Christmas party every year, and the year before my first drink, these older guys had kind of taken me behind the garage and thrown me a beer, and I ran back to the party crying. Like I was like, Mom and Dad, you'll never believe it, but this is, and then I had a full year to kind of think about that moment coming again. And it did. And the next year at that same party, I was kind of like ready, and I had a couple Miller High Lifes. I'll never forget it. And for me, like a lot of people talk about that first drink and like that sense of ease and comfort that comes with it. And I felt like a super awkward kid, and then I didn't. But for me, it was kind of a different experience. And then I had that first drink, and what happened was I just started to lie, like immediately. Like I went back to the party, and I saw my parents, and they asked where I was and what I was doing, and I lied. And what I found out is that, I woke up the next morning and I still opened presents, and Christmas still happened. And so the lesson that taught me was I could lie and I could get away with it. And for the next 15 years, from like whatever it was, 12, 13 years old, until I was 27, when I eventually got sober, just as much as like the alcohol use and eventually the drug use was a part of my story, so was the lying. I think that's something that people who have experienced substance abuse, whether firsthand or have a loved one that's gone through it, like the lying is the most challenging part, because we love these people so much, and people loved me so much that they wanted to believe everything that I said. And
why do you think you lied? Like in that moment, that's such a good point about that sense of that kind of the hiding behaviors and the lying and stuff like that. But why do you think in that moment with your first drink, what did you get out of the line?
You don't want to get caught, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, come on, like you don't want Mom and Dad to know you were pounding beers behind the garage, like
Mm-hmm.
So I think any child or adolescent in that scenario is going to lie, or at least most of them. And I don't know. Then I had like this little secret that was mine that I could take into the hallways, and then, when school started back up after holiday break, and be like, dude, you'll never believe it. Like I drank beer, and so then I felt like I was like ahead of the curve, and it was my social responsibility to kind of, put my friends in a headlock and say, like, let's go party together. And that's what I did in high school. Right. It's like, I always say I had a very dazed and confused high school experience. It was like, we partied in the woods and belted out classic rock songs and made bonfires and shotgun beers and ran from cops. And we had a shitload of fun, but I always knew, even from a young age, that there was like this relationship or this fantasizing that took place with my alcohol consumption that was not going to be good.
What was the fantasy?
No, I mean, it's just like, look, I played 3 sports in high school, right? Football, basketball, baseball. And I had a lot of really cool shit going on in my life. And like, I was kissing girls for the first time, but I can tell you that the most important thing in my life was making sure that on a Friday or Saturday night that I had my 12-pack of Natural Light, so I could go into the woods and get drunk, and like once I got that 12-pack, like nothing else mattered in the world, like nothing else mattered. And that's like, I didn't know it at the time, but that was like an early sign for me as I look back on my story of alcoholism and drug addiction and just that obsession. And like the panic that would ensue if I didn't get, what I wanted for the weekend, kind of thing. So.
And it's interesting too, how you mentioned, and we talk a lot about in this podcast about how, mental health and is just so integrated with all of our relationships, right? It's like such a big part of it. And for you, starting to drink had this component of like, hey, we're gonna, this is the way I could bond with people. Like I had this secret. I'm the one who could get people to party. So it had this like, developing your relationships based on that too, in a little way.
Yeah, I mean, I loved high school. My friends, like, we have this thing in the fresh chain, and there's like 15 of us. The guys in my grade and the guys below me, like, we're still thick as thieves, best friends. The tech chain goes all day, every day, and like, that was our like formative years where we really partied. And what I can tell you about that, which is like an example I use a lot of times, even in my profession, if you would have lined, those 15 guys up my senior year in high school, I think, as society kind of defines it today, you could have picked any of us out of a line and said, you should go get some help, right? The way that we were drinking, the way that we were smoking pot, the way that we were carrying on, it wasn't normal for an adolescent. Fast forward 20 years and you look at that line of people, it's myself and maybe one or two other guys that ultimately and eventually needed to get some help. And then you got the lawyer, the guys working, like families and the whole thing, the people that kind of like grew out of it. And that's why I struggle so much in my work today when I see like a 17 or 18-year-old kid or a case come across my desk, because I think it's tough for the parent, because do you trust your gut and kind of like push them forward to get some help, or do you kind of let them grow out of this? And I don't know the answer. I don't know. For me, I had to carry on for really another 10 years until I finally, hit a bottom. And there were friends of mine that, went to college and party, and after college they met a girl, got married, and like, yeah, they could take it or leave it. And it's just so crazy, just the minute difference between someone who eventually, needs to get help and someone who just might grow out of it or be in a phase. And that's what I think is so challenging about the work we do, because there's no playbook. Someone has cancer, you know what to do. Yeah. Someone has addiction or alcoholism, each case is different. That's what really sucks.
So Kibby and I both have family members with alcoholism. Mine actually just returned from rehab for the second time, so she's very much still in the. Yes, I know. Yeah. Good clap.
Come on, if we can talk about all the dark, doomy shit, we got to celebrate the win. So when I hear someone just got out of treatment, like,
you know what?
Yeah.
She fucking loved it. She loved rehab. Nice. At the best
Me
time.
too.
Really?
Well, I was joking, like, with this whole show, everyone's like, dude, how did you go away? And like, you were in this bubble. I was like, well, I fucking went to rehab for 4.5 months. Like, I can do this shit in my sleep.
It's really the way she talked about it. I was like, that really reminds me of being on The Bachelor. It's sort of that summer camp feeling in a way, but obviously with a different aim. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, because thinking about my own kids and I still drink. I have a relationship with alcohol that I feel safe in, but I would say that my family was pretty heavy. Like, I drank in the home starting from like 13, 14. And in some ways I think that went really well for me, because by the time I was in situations that would cause problems for me, I was used to it. I built that up. But obviously that didn't work with another family member. And do you have a sense of like what kind of family dynamics are most helpful for this, or what parents can teach if you're thinking about, adolescents that come across his desks? Like,
yeah, it's tough. And I appreciate, I mean, like, the family, I think oftentimes are the heroes in all this, because it's so frustrating, and at any given time, we'll have a couple cases going, and we do interventions and we consult with families all the time. And we always tell them, like, at the end of the day, truly, and it sounds gimmicky and cliche, but love is gonna carry the most weight here. Like, just continuing to reinforce the message of like, we love you, we are here for you. Mm-hmm. And obviously, like, there's motivational interviewing and some other things that we can like get in, like that work that we know to work. But me personally, I'm not break down the door in the middle of the night and throw someone in handcuffs and ship them off the treatment guy. I've just heard too many stories of the 14, 15-year-old kid that's had that happen to them, and the trauma associated with that ends up being far greater than, the trauma of, whatever, just going to treatment on their terms or continuing to kind of act out. So, for family members, it's crazy. And like, what we're seeing today is there's a lot of our clients, or people that we're dealing with, there's adoption, there's divorced parents, there's two sets of parents. Sometimes there's three sets, like it's just, there's so much in this day and age that just is working against us. It's tough. So.
And it sounds like, I mean, even just from the show, you kept mentioning how loving your family was. I was curious, you're talking about the lying, which I'm sure it's really hard for, the people that you grew up with, people you're close to. Can you talk a little bit more about what relationships you had? Like, how did it affect your relationships with your loving family? Eventually your partners or friends or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, so what happened for me is I went to college, right? And like I my sophomore year, I went to York College, which is a little college out in Pennsylvania, where I went to study sport management, which, I do nothing with today, and play baseball, right? And so that was the goal. And I met a woman my sophomore year, and it was like in my head, the way I grew up is that my goal is to go to college and graduate college in 4 years and then move back home and start this suburban life that, my parents had given me and that I was prepared to give to, my family. And, I met this girl, and for me in my head, it was like, okay, this is game over. We're going to like date throughout the rest of college, and I'm going to, do what I do. And even looking back at that relationship, and I eventually married her, and she really ended up saving my life. I can say that today. She's a beautiful human who has like a very healthy relationship with alcohol and is a school teacher. And I have not one bad word to say about her. But like, she was like another piece to this puzzle that, as like an alcoholic, I now know that I was just trying to build up this front and roll out to the world so that no one could question the way I drank. And I did a really good job at it, and I graduated college in 4 years, and I played baseball, and people didn't really shine a flashlight on the fact that I was blacking out 4 nights a week. It just wasn't, because Zac was just Zac, and he's the life of the party. And in my soul, I knew, what I was doing wasn't healthy, but the people that really loved me didn't want to focus on that. They wanted to celebrate my successes, which is like, how can you blame your family? And then, my shift in my story personally happened when, I guess it was like a year after college, I was working my first kind of job, and me and my college buddies had rented a house down the shore, and we were going to go party for the weekend, Memorial Day weekend. The car was packed, but I felt like shit. I was like seeing kaleidoscopes anytime I closed my eyes. And I went to this like side of the road, janky X-ray place. Cause like, I don't know why, maybe God was just like tapping me on the shoulder. And turns out I have a brain tumor. So I'm at, ironically, University of Penn Hospital the next morning, like getting this thing cut out of my head. And, I'm in complete good health today. But what I can tell you about that experience as it relates to Kibby's question and family support is like, I was in that hospital for like 20 something days. I was never alone. Like literally there wasn't a minute that passed by where I didn't have a family member, a friend, a wife, or at the time, a girlfriend, by my side. And so what I always tell people is like, if love could get me sober, I would have got sober in that moment. Right. I just would have. But reality was my alcoholism was already live. I couldn't wait to get out of that hospital bed so I could start drinking again. And to boot, like this nurse was pumping pain meds into my arm, and it felt really good. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to, drink like I want to drink, and no one can say shit about it, because now I'm like some kind of like hero, like that's in recovery from this brain tumor. And it was just like a perfect storm for me. And I just kept pushing my life forward. It was kind of nutty, to the point where like I proposed to this girl, and like we had the big wedding, and like as the story goes, we kind of like along the way we hold people hostage and we grab people. And I know that I'm a lovable guy, I can say that. And so, people were able to turn their head away to some of my bullshit, unfortunately. So.
Well, one question I had is, what do you think about the saying that we always hear about alcoholism or addiction in general, which is you have to wait until they hit rock bottom? Because I mean, I will say it's as a loved one of someone with alcoholism, it's a terrifying statement, because rock bottom, I keep thinking she's hit it, and it turns out there's a floor below. But on the other hand, there's also a frustration of like, it doesn't seem it does seem like in some ways those crises have helped her then seek help. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
I don't know. I mean, look, it's a great question. I can tell you that I've seen 16-year-old kids who were quote unquote just smoking pot, addictively. And I say just with quotations around that, because I do believe that marijuana is an issue and going to be an issue in our society, because it's just getting stronger and kids are smoking it at a much younger age and they're frying their brains. But I digress. I've seen like 16-year-old kids who were quote unquote just smoking pot, like get sober and never question that they need to be sober and go on and, get 10 years and 20 years, like sobriety at 36 years old, having 20 years of sobriety, because they were just convinced at a young age that they had this thing. Right. And then I've seen, and I know of girls who've been to treatment 30, 35 times, and it's still not enough, and the truth is I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer, and I don't know what rock bottom is. I know for me, like, I was sticking things into my body that I shouldn't have been sticking into my body, as a kid who grew up not wanting for anything. And like, I was sleeping on the street without needing to sleep on the street. I had plenty of places to go, but I was just running from everything in my life. I went to rehab the first time, and after rehab, I got drunk and my wife left me and everything else. And guess what? Like, that wasn't enough. I needed to keep going for another 8 or 9 months and like really, come to grips with the fact that I couldn't drink alcohol or do drugs safely. And some people can, and like, that's okay.
Yeah, it's scary for the loved one, like your family member or your wife or anything. From my own experience, my mom was an alcoholic, recovered for several years now, so it's amazing. But
amazing, props to her. Go mom.
Yeah, she worked really hard. She hit rock bottom where the doctors were like, "Your liver's toast, or you could get better, so your choice," and she did. But I remember the feeling of being, having her as a loved one, where it's you feel like so out of control, right? You see a problem, you talk to them about it or fight about it, and maybe they go to treatment, maybe they don't, maybe they know what the problem is. Like it's really hard for family members and friends to like kind of stay on the sidelines. So for you, like, when did people start to find out, or when did they say anything to you, or did anyone ask you to get help, or anything that they did to like push you towards like, I got to get treatment? Or
yeah, the first time I always tell this story like it was I remember this day so vividly. I was at my dad's office. In addition to everything else that I was doing, I was down some money to a bookie because I was doing a little bit of gambling, and I had talked him into paying off my bookie. And so in my mind, like, again, I had like figured it all out, and I went home to the house the house I owned, with the cars in the driveway and the little dog and the wife and the whole thing, this life that I'd set up despite, my alcoholism. And my mom and wife were out getting drinks, ironically. And one of my friends went up to them and basically outed me. He said, like, Zach's in a bad way. We know he's in a bad way. You got to do something about this. And they came home that night. My mom walked in the door. I was like, what are you doing here? And I didn't fight it. I actually, hilariously enough, because we have to have a little levity here, I got in the car that night and I'd seen a billboard for treatment, and I actually drove myself to rehab. And I think I was probably like their first ever drive-in customer. And I knocked on the door, like, you can't just drive in here. So I was very willing the first time I went. And I stayed for 28 days, like the movie 28 days, and I did everything they told me to do. I ran around that place, and like, I did the therapy, and I did what I know, like, as an athlete and someone who grew up with structure in my life, like, I'm going to do all these things and I'm going to get this. But the problem was I was completely full of shit, And so, like, the one good thing that came out of my first treatment experience, and like, to answer your question, yeah, people knew, like, my friends knew I wasn't the same guy they grew up with. And my wife knew that every time we got in a fight, it was over my drinking, but no one was going to call me on it until my friend kind of spoke up. And I did that first treatment experience. And the one good thing that came out of it was my wife was given a set of tools to know what to do if I drank again. And surely enough, like, whatever it was, 5-10 days later, I got drunk and I went out and bought drugs, and I had them in the house, and she caught me. And thank God for her. She like kept that boundary and she pieced out. She called her dad that night. He drove down. That was the last night I ever slept in that house.
Wow.
And, props to her. Like she listened and she saved my life, like she decided that she was done and I had to go on for another however long until I hit my quote unquote rock bottom. And then I was back in treatment like 8 months later for 4.5 months. And that time I knew like, all right, I know nothing. It got pretty dark. So
It's interesting. You talk a lot about the word that comes to my head is power when you talk about like I got away with something again. That lying, I woke up and the next day, Christmas morning, still happened. What was that like? And then how? And then you said that when your wife left you, that actually saved your life. Are those two things connected, or because for once you couldn't get away with something, or kind of what's the?
yeah, I mean, she was the first person in my life to say the party was over.
Uh huh.
Like the first, and it wasn't in a way that was like malicious or mean. It was actually had a lot of love behind it. She just, with tears in her eyes, said, I can't do this anymore.
Mm.
And it took me, I mean, 2 weeks into treatment, I was still blaming her for everything, of course, and even a year into this thing, I wanted to blame her for shit. But like eventually what recovery has taught me is really to look at my part in all my relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So disregarding whoever is involved, whether it's my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, my wife, my girlfriend, my best friend, like it doesn't matter what they're doing to me. Like I get to a place where I get to evaluate my behavior in that relationship and look at where I'm being selfish and dishonest and, really put that on the table and understand that I can't control the people around me. So she did me a huge solid, and like, I thank her for that, honestly.
That's incredible. I mean, it must have been so hard, especially, of course, I bet she loved you a lot and scary to kind of leave someone who's in a bad way, right? To be like, I could stay here and help and, make sure he's safe or I could leave and you don't know what's going to happen when you do that. So props to her.
Yeah, props to her for sure. And, like that's all the gnarly, gross stuff. And my story, in its entirety is, you could write a book about it. I mean, I got my gallbladder cut out to, seeking drugs. I, did some really down and dirty stuff to cop drugs. I got very comfortable kind of like with the street life and that was a whole nother world that I learned about that I didn't know existed. And, now you don't need a drug dealer. You just kind of drive into these neighborhoods and meet up with some people and, carry on how you want. So it's like, it fed my isolation. But, the beautiful part is like, as a result of all this gross, gnarly experience that I had, I went to rehab and then I show up in New York City, like a place where I had been like one time before to see Simon and Garfunkel. Right? And like, I show up here and I'm like, wait, hold up. Like I'm starting my life over again in this city, and that was almost 10 years ago. And like now New York is I caught a lot of shit on this show from people in Philly, like, why'd you do New York City as your hometown and you don't even like Philadelphia? I'm like, slow down. Like I love Philly. I still have my Eagles season tickets, but New York City is my safe place. And I don't know if a lot of people can say that, but what I've experienced over the past 9+ years is nothing short of miraculous, and I wouldn't trade my life for anything. So all that experience that I talk about, it just leads to this beautiful existence that I get to have today.
Yeah, one of the things I was most excited to talk to you about was actually sobriety. I mean, there's the addiction part, the dark days, but then I've heard a lot of recovered alcoholics talk about how much they actually love sobriety,
Mm-hmm.
um, how much more intensely they feel in certain ways, and so I just wondered what kind of the first steps of sobriety were like for you, and what that journey's been like.
Yeah, it's crazy because I just heard a guy talk and he said something that reminded me of my early sobriety, which was I had this guy who was kind of mentoring me and he sat me down really early on when I just got to New York and he kind of said like, find 3 guys that you can trust. Find 3 guys that you can, not girls, guys that you can have a relationship with. And he's like, if you can do that, like you got a shot here. and it was so simple, but it was some of the best advice I'd ever been given because I did it, like I really forced myself to get out there and like get into this community and meet guys that were like me, and my perception of what recovery was for the first 26 years of my life was a bunch of guys, sitting in a basement talking about, how life is horrible and yeah, they're sober, but nothing else good has taken place. And my experience in recovery is that it's the exact opposite. It is like my life and my existence is next level. I mean, the shit I've been able to do in terms of like concerts and travel and golf and friends and just like showing up, it's sobriety is the best. And that's why I'm so convinced, like every morning when I wake up, that I kind of have this competitive advantage against the rest of the world because like I don't think about all that other shit.
You also said something on the show that I thought was really wonderful is when you were talking to Tasha, and I apologize if I butcher this, but she, I think, was talking about, the nature of relationships and how they change and how she might be different in 10 years and would you still love her? And you said it was your anniversary of sobriety. And I think what you said was that sobriety means that you don't run.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering if you could sort of speak about that a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, well, naturally, right? Like when I am active, all I'm doing is running. I'm running from feeling, I'm drinking, drugging to not want to show up for life. So when I get sober, I'm able to like look people in the eye, admit when I'm wrong, show up when, for the great party, but also show up for like the funeral, and like life is, to me, what I didn't know, like, there's like this saying, I wish I knew then what I knew now. Like I'm turning 37 this week. And, at 27, I had no idea, about life and relationships and what it really means to kind of show up and be honest and do what I say I'm going to do, and part of it, it's annoying to people. Like if I say I'm going to be somewhere at 3:00, like I was struggling to get on this thing. Like I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be 30 seconds late. Cause like, for me, that's a reflection on like, I care so deeply about recovery. I don't want shit. I don't want people to say anything, be able to say anything negatively about the way that I live my life, because now even more so than ever, like I am some type of like reflection of this life. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Is it stressful?
No.
Okay.
It's stressful. And like people ask me that all the time. And like, it's funny. And when you're like in early recovery, I'll be talking to guys and they're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And this is stressful. And, there's certain things that we're asked to do. And I'm like, what's stressful, man? Stressful is like having your mom cry herself to sleep every night because she doesn't know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
Or like stressful is waking up, dope sick and having $0 in your pocket and not knowing how the hell you're going to go get high. That's stressful. Having to like tell the truth and show up, I feel more, but it's not stressful.
I mean, what a journey. I mean, even the way you described starting out with the drinking, have a lot of lying and not being accountable and not seeing your own contribution to relationships and problems, and then having the complete opposite, like showing up, committing, just being here for the good and the bad. I mean, for your friends and family, they must have seen like such a shift. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the other thing this thing teaches me is that like, I'm not that important. Like at the end of the day, I'm just not that important, like that's just, what it's that simple, no matter what I want to think, I'm not that important. And I'm not perfect. I'm going to make a ton of mistakes along the way, and that's okay. You learn to have a little bit of compassion for yourself, and I don't know.
Yeah, some humility.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, you've gone even the extra mile and made so much meaning out of this by, working with recovery with other people too. So tell us a little bit about your release recovery program and what you do there, what it is.
Yeah, we love it. We're a family and we have a shitload of fun. It's like, I swear, when COVID lifts, I invite you guys up. Come hang with us for a day.
Yeah.
I will show.
Yeah, we're down.
We will show you what recovery looks like, because right before I walked in here, I was out here talking to a bunch of the guys. They challenged the staff 5-on-5 to some hoops tomorrow, so we're gonna lace it up and go play some ball with some of the guys. But no, so one of my best friend in life and my co-founder here is a guy by the name of Justin Gerlin. He's a classically trained social worker. Shares a lot of similar experiences as me, and we, how people meet, right? Like when I showed up in the city 10 years ago, or just under 10 years ago, he was there, and our paths crossed, and we founded Release Recovery a little under 4 years ago. We acquired a property up in Westchester County, which is now 17 beds for men. So we really specialize in, and then I should say we have a program in the city for men and a program in the city, New York, that is for women. So we have 40 beds total. And that piece of our business, if you will, and I hate even calling it a business, but I guess it is at the end of the day, really focuses on helping individuals who go to treatment reintegrate back into the world. So minimum stay is 3 months, and they come and they learn to live again, and we get them back out into the world. We help them get jobs. We help them finish school. We're 18 and up. So, we've had an 82-year-old guy with us, and we've had, a bunch of 18-year-old knuckleheads and everything in between. Right. And so that's a big part of what we do. And the foundation of our program, which is a lot of what we've talked about on this podcast, is just really recreating a healthy home environment. So, meals are a big deal to us. And family dinner time and just having those positive conversations. And then in addition to that work, Justin and I do a lot of consultation. So, we'll get families that call us that, have a loved one that's struggling, and we're trying to help them get into treatment. And then, coming out of treatment, maybe they're not a fit for our sober living or transitional living services. We'll set up some case management where we'll drug test them and monitor them. And really, we take the approach that, each case is different. And as I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, right, like things like cancer and heart disease and diabetes, there's a pretty straightforward approach in treating those illnesses. Mm-hmm. And with addiction, man, every case is different. It really is. And so there's that. And then, the thing that I'm really putting a lot of time and energy now into is right before COVID hit, we started our own 501 Release Recovery Foundation, and we are super pumped about that. And we're going to be raising money for people who can't afford it to go get some help, because, Justin and I have fallen into this release and what we do, we've fallen into this world. We work a lot with individuals who are private pay, right? So people that can afford our services, and that's just kind of our niche and what we've fallen into. And, we kind of woke up one day and looked each other in the eye and said, we can do more. And so we got a lot of really cool shit going on with that. We're going to raise money through some of the marathons, and we got a t-shirt that's about to drop, which I will send you guys one, or you will buy one.
We'll buy one.
That initial round of funding is going to go to helping women and people of color get treatment, because we have just seen time and time again that those are two demographic, they're underserved in our world. For whatever reason, white dudes get treatment. I don't know why, and they get help, and there's more sober living beds in the world for men by 4 times than women, and that kind of thing. So we got a lot of really cool stuff on the horizon. And at the end of the day, people have asked me, you have this new platform, you have this, and I'm like, yeah, if I can help one more person as a result of this thing, I'm going to be a happy guy. So.
What can you, so I will say, my family member is very, very fortunate to have resources. She went to a fabulous rehab, but I wonder, well, what if she didn't? What kinds of options are there for people who don't have, $50,000 to go to rehab, astronomical amounts of money? What can they do? And are there any organizations that you like?
I'm hoping that Release Recovery Foundation ends up,
Yeah.
solving a lot of those issues, to the best of our ability. Look, it sucks, but it's kind of like anything else in our healthcare system. Like,
Mhm.
there's obviously some government funded programs, and there's some, if you have Medicare, Medicaid, like you can typically find a bed somewhere, somehow. A lot of it's based on state to state. I mean, we here at Release, especially now with some of the inquiries that we've gotten, we're trying to at least provide resources to everyone that calls so they can get some help, but it sucks. And I think it's just like anything else going on in the world today. Like, we all need to do a little bit more, and like bring some awareness to this thing. And hopefully, I mean, there's some organizations out there that are doing some really good stuff on like the government level or lobbying or whatever, getting some, like Shatterproof is an organization that really, is in Congress and is in there and is trying to help people understand that, everyone who needs treatment deserves to get it. I believe that.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for telling us more about your services. We'll definitely promote that on our website and otherwise, and especially the fundraising efforts. That's awesome. Also, I work as a therapist in New York Presbyterian Hospital over on at home, but like on the east side. So we'll refer people over to you guys. That'll be great.
I didn't know that. You're so are you sitting in New York right now?
Yeah.
Oh, no shit. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So I'm in the Zoom world, but I'm a therapist. So
yeah, and you should come by. Like, when COVID's done, definitely come by. I mean, at least
absolutely.
say what's up.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. I'd love to. And it sounds like you have such a nice approach to it, which is like integrating into the community and having that love for support. I love all that approach. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, our days are structured for sure, and like we definitely have a bunch of touch points throughout the day where our clients are getting together and sharing. And, I think one of the things that's worth mentioning is COVID is anyone who's tried to get sober from last March until now, has been deprived of the opportunity to go to like in-person recovery meetings, which is in a lot of ways the most important thing that we do. It's just like connecting with another human who's going through this thing. And, even us right now doing this, I would love to be in person with you guys, it would make this so much more meaningful. But
yeah.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, for my family member just coming back from rehab, that is a struggle that I think she's having. Is in rehab, she had this community, all these people that she loved, and she was having a great time. And it was actually very scary for her to come out, because then she's like, who's there going to be for me on the other side, and what am I going to do? And it sounds like one of the things that your program does is create structure, routine, community, love, and a lot of activity, a lot of positivity. Are there what would you kind of advocate for people coming out of rehab, and for the friends and family? How can they help?
Do what they tell you you should do. This thing is not rocket science. It's hard in the sense that people getting sober, myself, I'll use my own personal experience. Like, I lived a certain way for many, many years, and I had to break a lot of habits. But at the end of the day, I did the things that they told me to do in rehab, which was like, get connected, see a therapist, meet people, like jump into the recovery community, like do the things that you don't want to do, like go out to coffee with people, all the stuff that feels super cheesy and super corny and like you're too cool for, and you just want to like get back to hanging out with your old friends and like the whole thing. I learned that I was able to do a lot of those things. And now today, I am living proof that my best friends in life are not, I shouldn't say it. I have 5 or 6 guys in my life that, I kind of got sober with and are some of my best friends in life, obviously. And then I have a whole nother host of friends, which I talked about earlier, which is like the guys I went to high school with, and they're like, they know I'm sober. They know I don't drink. They know my story. And like, that is such old news in those relationships. And I'm just Zac to them now. So the first 6 to 12 months is tough, but if you can get to that year and the brain really starts to heal and you can start to love yourself a little bit and look in the mirror and be like, okay, like I'm starting to like myself a little bit more. And if the family around you or the people around you are supporting that, I think the person has a good shot. But you got to get connected. You got to have other people in your life that know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, another thing, pulling from my family example is I remember her just had a lot of discomfort around telling people she doesn't drink, and I guess like being labeled that way, or not wanting to be awkward for other people. It's a sad commentary on society that has to be like a defining, or that it feels like that's a defining feature of someone versus just
Yeah, I mean, look, I try to share this about this as much as I can because look, I went to a lot of events early in sobriety. I went out a lot. I did a lot of things. I was around a lot of people, and never once did anyone, I shouldn't say never once, but very rarely did anyone ask what was in my cup, which was,
mm-hmm.
seltzer with some lime. And the people that did, most of the time were people that most likely had a problem with alcohol themselves and were just trying to recruit someone to drink with them, or project their shit onto you and say like, why don't you drink, like whatever like that. So I think that comes with time. And then as that carries into right dating, everyone's like, how do you date in sobriety? And like what I've learned is if I sit down with a woman and I'm out on a date and I say that I'm sober, and this was even the case with Tasha on the show. Like if I tell her that I'm sober and she's not okay with that or not willing to accept that, like it's all good. And I'm not meant to be with that person.
Yeah.
But just like knowing that and having the confidence to believe that and not giving my power away to the person sitting across from me. But it's a tough place to get to. And I get it, like, because we're insecure. And like you said, we feel everything.
Amazing. I know I want to be mindful of your time, and I want in the last few minutes, is there anything any last words to share with loved ones of people struggling with addiction, like family members, friends, anything, any tips, words of advice, words of encouragement?
No, you are the unsung heroes, the family members. I got to tell you, they don't get enough love. They don't get enough love. And that's, if anything has come from, the show that I was just on and kind of having this bigger reach, if you will, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, man, I saw you on the show. I decided to stop drinking, or I got 90 days, or I'm a year or so. And like, I've tried to like people that wrote me with purpose, like I'm like feverishly trying to like write them back, like, keep going. I love you. Like I'm like high-fiving, like, in my apartment, like myself, like all pumped up. But even more so, I'm getting a lot of notes of people either sharing about their loss and really curious about how like they can honor, their loved ones who have passed, or the ones that hit home the most. I remind them of someone who they lost, a lot of those messages. Mm-hmm. And I just tell them to like, you're a hero for reaching out, like keep going. There's obviously volunteer opportunities and organizations you can donate to. And, there's support groups like Al-Anon and other things that you can get involved with to kind of deal with some of that stuff. And then family members who have reached out to me and said like, hey, I saw you on the show, and, my sister, brother, wife, husband, whatever it is, just got it 6 months or just got a year. And like, we watched it together. And like, that's so cool because the family, they're the ones that are oftentimes forgotten, like if you really think about it, and I'm good, I got a couple minutes here. If you really think about it, right? In my case, I'll just use my experience. I went to rehab for 4.5 months. I had 4.5 months of intensive treatment, care, 24/7 around the clock to deal with my stuff. My family during all that was working, raising kids, carrying on with their life, all while obsessing over how I am doing. Mm-hmm. So they kind of get left behind, and then they come out for a weekend and they say it's family education weekend or whatever it is. And all of a sudden they're supposed to just be, have all the tools to deal with having a loved one that's struggling with this thing. And it's not fair. But there are groups, there's support groups or ways that family members can get involved. So to them, I say, you guys are heroes. You are lifesavers. Thank you. Keep showing up. I know it's not easy, but what I always tell people is like, we hear you. I hear you. Everyone hears you, whether you want to believe that or not. Like when you say I love you to someone that is blackout drunk, mm-hmm. putting that energy out into the world, that person hears you whether you want to know it or not. So.
Well, that is a fabulous note to end on. We could have talked to you for 4 hours. You are welcome back anytime to talk about this stuff.
This was fantastic. Thank you. It was so heartfelt.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. When Jacqueline emailed me, I said, I can get behind this, because I'm getting a lot of these kind of requests and stuff like that. And you guys obviously get it. And the reality is, if like one person heard this today or hears this whenever you throw it up on however you throw these things up, gets help, like then we all did our job. And kudos to you guys for doing what you're doing with the podcast. I saw some of the topics you're covering, narcissism and stuff. I mean, it's like you're digging into some gnarly stuff. So, keep going. It's good stuff.
Okay. Well, I thought that was an awesome conversation. And I mean, so many of our guests are so great. So I guess I say that every time, but I really was excited to talk to Zac. He had kind of the unique experience of being both an expert and someone with personal experience with this. And so it was really great hearing him speak to both. And also, what a nice guy.
No, he was fantastic. And his stories really, and his whole journey highlighted how much addiction and all this mental health really involves like the whole system, right? The family, the friends, the community, the support during the addiction, support during the recovery. And he just lives in line with this mission that we love so much, which is like recovering from mental health and mental health itself. You just really need that social connection. You really need those relationships. You really need trust and intimacy, and learning how to show up for your relationships and other people, and learning how to love. So it just it was so great. But, so we thank Zac so much for his time, but we want to share the resources that he was talking about. So his recovery program, you find it at releaserecovery.com. Check out the services that he talked about in the podcast, as well as the places to donate to really support people who can't afford these services. It's very, very expensive to get this kind of help that he did. And a lot of people don't have that help. And so for him to do this fundraising efforts to support those people is just incredible. So please go to that website, releaserecovery.com.
Yeah, I second that. I'm really excited about the work he's doing, especially, Kibby and I both have family members who have been suffering from the same thing. And so it warms my heart to see somebody so dedicated to this and so excited about this work and trying to make it more accessible to other people. I'm very aware of how lucky my loved one, is to be able to go to the best rehab there is. But I'm hoping for a future with really great treatment options for everyone. And so is he. So check out Release Recovery and donate if you can. Thanks so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this or any other episode, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe. We'll see you next week. Bye, guys. By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement.